All right, this lecture is for those of you who need a logo and don't have one, and you want to make something quick. It's also a great tip for those of you who might be traditional artists or illustrators and you've got a lot of great sketches you want to bring in. I want to show you a couple really cool tips that I've learned. I actually learned this originally from Dave Cross, but what we're going to do, just get a blank white piece of paper and a Sharpie. It doesn't have to be anything special. And we're going to create a custom logo. This could be if you're going to build your own portfolio, or you probably have seen this a lot for photographers where they use their signature. So I'm just going to make one up real quick. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Probably the messier the better. It's going to look cool that way. So I got my signature right here. What I'm going to do is take my iPhone and we're going to take a picture real quick. So what I can do is, when I hover this over the image, I'm going to push and hold on the screen. It's going to lock it, and then I'll get a little sunshine icon, and I can drag it up, and that's going to overexpose it. What this is going to do when I do that is take the background and blow it out. So it's all white, just pure white, which will help me out once we get to Photoshop. So we'll do this. We'll lock it down, drag it up. I'm going to hit the camera button. Awesome. All right, and now what I'm going to do is share this with my laptop. I'm going to go ahead and open up AirDrop, Command-Shift-4, and my little face shows up on my phone. I can tap on it and it immediately sends it to my laptop and I'm ready to go. You can also just text it to yourself or email it to yourself or however you do that. So now that I've got that image in my downloads, I'm going to pull it up into Photoshop, and the first thing you'll notice is, well, I don't know, that it's sideways, I suppose, but also we've still got a little bit of a shadow and it's not super clear yet. So what I'm going to do is open up my levels. I'll hit Command L for levels. I'm going to drag my slider right here a little bit further to the right so it really blows out those whites. And then I'm going to bring my black slider back to try and salvage some of that, all right? And that looks pretty good. I'll click OK. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and get my lasso tool, and I'm just going to drag around my signature here real quick. So that way, if there's any shadow that I missed, it doesn't come over in this next step. I'm going to add that here. All right, I'll hit Command J to jump cut that to the next layer. I'll click on my background, and I'm just going to fill it with a color, and that way I can see what I'm working with on this layer. Now, you could just use the magic wand tool if you're used to that, and click and get a pretty decent selection. I hit Command-Shift-I to get the inverse, Command-J to jump cut that to its own layer, and that's actually pretty good. I could almost just run with that, but let me show you what I do here. Okay, so let's double click on your layer that's got the signature on it, and what I want to do here is I don't want to click on the title and I don't want to click on the actual thumbnail because I want to open up the layer style. So I just double click off to the side here and I get the layer style. Let me move this so we can see it. And what we're going to do now, this is gold. You could actually use this for textures as well. Let's say sometimes when I put text on a background, I'll use this trick as well. So let me show you that next. But for right now, I'm just going to grab this white slider and drag it to the left. And that pretty much does the same thing as the magic wand. But here's the difference. Here's where this is so much better. What I'm going to do is hold down the Alt key and click and drag on that white slider. And what it's going to do is actually, I mean, I could crank this way up so you can really see what it's doing here. But it actually cuts through the logo with the different tones, right? So the whiter tones start to fade through. So what that's going to do is leave more of the natural marker feel to it. Or if you're working with textures, it'll bring the darks or the lights back in. It's really cool. And what I'm going to do now is, let's just go ahead and look at this. All right, that's pretty good. I'll click OK. And what you'll notice, if I were to throw a drop shadow on this right now, let's just do that. You'll see that it doesn't follow the actual lines. It follows where that selection was. I'll go ahead and hit cancel. Or let's say that I was going to make a selection and I command click on this thumbnail. You'll see that it still sees all that pixel data. It's just the layer style is blending the whites, but it's still there. So what we're going to do now is add a new layer. So this new layer doesn't have anything in it yet. I'll command click the layer below it. And now I'm going to hit Command E, which is the same as going to layer down to merge layers. All right. So what it does is it smashes those two layers together, and anything that was transparent gets completely removed from the file. So now if I were to command click on that layer, you'll see that the selection follows the outline exactly. Well, the next thing I can do that's pretty handy is right up above this layer, I see the little lock text, and I've got some different things we can lock. Right now I want to lock this first one. That's our transparent pixels. So what this lets me do is I can change the color of that without having to make a selection. So let's say I want to make it, I don't know, let's say white. So I'll set my foreground color to white. I'll hit Alt Delete, and now my signature is white. Or I could hit Command Delete to fill up my background color, and now it's totally black. And you know how when we first took this picture it was kind of faded a little bit from the levels? So now it's totally solid black. So the next thing I want to do is bring down my ruler, my guides here. I'll grab this and I'll hit Command T to free transform, and I'll just reposition this a little bit so it's more horizontal and kind of make sure it looks good. And just like that, I've got a signature. So one thing you'll notice if you're familiar with graphic design, you've been working with it, this is just a raster image. So this is awesome for web design, but if you wanted to turn this into something more significant, we're going to need to actually vectorize this logo. So we need to bring it out of Photoshop and bring it into Illustrator. So there's a few ways we can do that. The way that I know how to do it, I'm going to command click on this layer so I get a selection. Then I'm going to hit the letter M to get my rectangular marquee. It doesn't matter. I just need one of the tools that make a selection. You could probably do it with the lasso tool as well. But with that tool, I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to go to Make Work Path. So my tolerance, I usually leave at 0.5. To be totally honest, I haven't played with it enough to know exactly how it's going to mess with it, but this seems to work for me. So my tolerance is set to 0.5. I'll click OK, and now it's turning that selection from the marching ants, marquee selection to an actual path. So if I zoom in, you can see it's kind of a mess because of the signature here. But what we can do with this now, if I zoom in a long ways here, you can see that it's actually points, anchor points and paths. So we can make this vector. So what I'm going to do now is come up here to File, Export, and then down to Paths to Illustrator. And we want to export this work path that we just made. I'll click OK. And I'm going to throw it right on my desktop, and I'll just change it to DM logo. I'll hit Save. And I'll throw it to my desktop. Now we'll go back into Finder, and we see that dmlogo.ai file. I'll double click on it. And I'll just click OK. All right, well, this is sort of helpful. Let me resize my screen here so we can see what's going on. If I zoom out, there's nothing. What in the world is going on? Well, if I hit Command A, it'll highlight everything on this artboard. And since it brought in just the paths, there wasn't any color applied to it. So now with the selection selected, I can grab my color and fill it with any color I want. So you'll notice that there's a little bit of cleanup I'm going to have to do. I can come in here, get my direct selection tool, the letter A, and delete that. And my tutorial is quickly falling apart. But hopefully this gets you close enough to where you can see how you can bring in your signature into Photoshop and then bring it back over into Illustrator to create a vector file. Had this come in a little bit cleaner, it would have been a much smoother tutorial, and I apologize. However, let's jump back into Photoshop. I want to show you one more thing before we're done here. So I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to go to my paths and deselect that work path. And you can see, so because I left all that texture in this, you can see how it just created a ton of work for for Illustrator. And it also, that's part of the reason why, if I look down in here, all that stuff, that's part of the reason why it kind of blew up on me on the other side. But it's still a pretty large image, so you could still use this for your logo in many ways, because this is 24, it's about 1800 pixels wide, the logo itself. So I could save this as a high-res Photoshop file or a TIFF file and use it in just about any marketing that I wanted to, because it's pretty large. It's larger than you'd want to use any logo anyway. So now what I want to do is just crop it down to the actual pixels of a logo. So what I'm going to do is turn off that background, and I'm going to go to Image, down to Trim, And I want to remove all of the transparent pixels from the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. So it's going to crop in without having to use the crop tool myself. It'll do it automatically. I'll click OK. Then it trimmed it down to the exact size of the logo. So if I was going to keep this to use in other things, I'd save multiple versions. I'd save your Photoshop PSD file. I'd save a TIFF file, because the TIFF file it supports transparency, so we could drop this on top of another design and the background would show through, but it's also a lossless format. So if I used a JPEG, not only would it export the white background behind it, JPEG, if you continue to save it over and over, it loses quality every time you save it. So that's why I would recommend, if you're going to work out of Photoshop something like this, save a TIFF. So the next thing I would do is, if I was going to use this on a website, is I would crop it down much smaller before I saved it. So maybe a couple hundred pixels wide. I'd get my crop tool, maybe set my width, or maybe 150 pixels. That looks good. I'll hit return, save it real small like that. And then this time I'd go to File, Export, Quick Export as a PNG. And that way I've got a transparent PNG version. So hopefully that helps you if you don't have a logo yet. You're kind of agonizing over what to do for yourself. I know when I made my first logo, I spent way too much time, as far as the one that was for myself, agonizing over what I wanted to do. So that could be an easy way for you to start rocking your portfolio website. Just use your signature or draw something if you're more comfortable drawing. Take a picture of it and get it into Photoshop that way. All right, I hope that helped you a ton. Be sure to leave your comments and questions in the comment section below.